Hey guys, today we'll be talking about how to destroy early queen attacks by black. So the opening we're going to look at is the king's pawn opening, which is e4 and e5. After that, we're going to play the common knight to f3. And now here, firstly, we're going to take a look at this rare line with bishop to c5. The purpose of this bishop to c5 move is that black gives up his e5 pawn, and if we capture with the knight, now since the bishop attacks our square on f2, he's going to play queen to h4 and try to threaten checkmate. So after knight captures, queen to h4, and now it's a mate in 1 on f2, which is kinda like a reverse scholar mate. So how do we defend against this threat of queen takes f2 checkmate? The easiest way that most of you guys will notice is maybe to play a move like queen to f3. We protect our own pawn and we attack the pawn on f7 as well. Or queen to e2, which is a bit more passive, but that protects our f2 pawn too. Now, why can we not play the move pawn to g3 over here then? Why is this a blunder? Because after pawn to g3, queen takes e4 check, and the queen is giving check, attacking the rook, and attacking the knight at the same time. So white is guaranteed to lose material after a blunder like pawn to g3. So 3 of these moves that I discussed, queen to f3, queen e2, and pawn to g3, is actually the top 3 most played move according to the Lee Chess database. But I'm going to recommend to you guys an even better variation, or even better reply, which is pawn to d4. So our pawn attacks the bishop, and it also blocks this diagonal on f2, so now there's no queen takes f2 checkmate. So black would probably capture here on e4 then with check. We're going to block with this bishop to e3, and we can really capture the black's bishop on the next move. The most popular move here is bishop to b6, retreating the bishop for black, but one important thing to note is that if let's say this is white to move, and we capture the bishop, we actually don't gain a piece because after captures, our knight is under attack by the black's queen, and black can recapture our knight. But we can sacrifice our knight to win some material first before we capture the bishop over here. So for example, we can play knight takes f7 first, threatening to capture the rook, so black will most likely recapture, and then only we capture the bishop on c5, and that would just mean that black's king is exposed and he can't castle anymore, so that's good for us as well. So anyways, let's see, bishop to b6, and now we're going to play this move, knight to d2, attacking the queen on e4. And already, it's not easy for black to find a safe square for the queen, because for example, queen to c6 and queen to g6, both squares are covered by our knights. The queen can't go to f4, can't go to g4 because that's covered by our bishop and our queen. So the only squares for the queen left to go is queen here to d5, queen here to h4, and queen here to f5. And of course, the black queen cannot capture any one of these pieces because all of them are defended. So as I mentioned, it's not very easy for black to find a move because, for example, after a move like queen d5, we already have bishop to c4. Our bishop attacks the queen, but not only that, our threat is on the f7 pawn with either our knight or our bishop after the queen moves away. So the most played move here is queen to f5, and now we're going to play the move bishop to c4 anyways. And the idea is to capture on f7 either with our bishop or pawn. Now, black doesn't have many moves to defend this threat. He can't play a move like pawn to d5 because we can just capture the pawn. So the only way black can defend is to play a move like knight to h6, which is the most played move according to the database, as the knight protects the pawn. Now, of course, we can just chop off this knight with our bishop, and after pawn captures, we can capture on f7 already. However, we have an even stronger move with pawn to g4, pushing up our kingside pawn forward because the queen is almost trapped. The queen has no moves besides queen to f6, the only safe square, and now we see the power of the pawn push to g4 because you can play pawn to g5, double attack queen and the knight, and this is an easy win for white, as you guys can see from the computer evaluation on the left, it already shows white being up +5. Next, the second line here we have is knight to c6, and after bishop to c4, the usual Italian opening, black is going to play knight to d4 in this position, which is also known as the Blackburne Shilling Gambit. So the whole point of this knight to d4 move is that black wants us to capture this free pawn on e5. Why? Because after knight takes e5, black is going to set up a trap with queen to g5. And for those of you who might be thinking, oh well, I wouldn't fall into such a simple trap, you are mistaken, because according to the database, almost 2 million people has fallen victim to this trap, and it's evident from the black's win rate percentage, which is 74%, and that just shows how powerful this trap is if white captures this pawn on e5 mistakenly. So let's see. After queen to g5, black invites white to capture on f7 again, and if we capture on f7, thinking it's already winning for white because now our knight attacks both the queen and the rook, this is actually already losing because after queen takes g2 from black, attacking our rook, rook to f1, queen takes e4 check, we can't block with the queen because the knight attacks our queen. So if we block with the bishop, knight to f3 is just smothered mate. And we don't want to lose in just 7 moves. So you guys can see how powerful this opening trap with knight to d4 is if you have never seen it before or if you fall into one of those traps. The smothered mate trap that I shown earlier. Alright, so what's the best way for white to play in this position then? Or what's the best move? Instead of capturing this pawn on e5, we're going to capture the knight instead. And after recapture, we're going to play the very simple castling, getting our king into safety. And now black has 2 main options, either pawn to d6 or bishop to c5. So bishop to c5 is the second most played move, and this is actually already a mistake because we already have a tactical blow for white. So pause the video for a bit if you like to figure out what the tactical blow here is. It's quite simple, just 2 moves. The tactical blow here is bishop takes f7 check, because after king takes, now we have queen to h5 check. The queen hits the king and hits the bishop as well. So for example, after a move like pawn to g6 or a king move, we just capture the bishop and we're going to win this d4 pawn on the next move as well, as there's no way for black to defend, because if he plays a move like queen to f6, trying to protect the pawn, now this pawn is under attack instead, and we just capture the c7 pawn. So essentially, we're just 2 pawns up easily, and black cannot castle with his king since he already moved, recapturing our bishop earlier. Okay, so bishop to c5 is easy. We have a tactical blow. Now what about pawn to d6, which is the most common move here? So after pawn to d6, we're going to play the move pawn to c3. We want black to capture our pawn because after captures, we can recapture with the knight, and that helps us develop a piece. So after knight takes, the most played here is knight to f6. And now I'm going to show you this move which has an 81% win rate, but not many people know about this move. So the move here is to play queen to b3. And the idea is very simple. We line up our queen and our bishop to give this attack on the f7 pawn, and so we're going to capture it with check on the next move. And it's already not easy for black to defend, because if he plays a move like bishop to e6, that doesn't really defend because we can just capture. After pawn captures, we can just capture with check and we win the pawn. Or after bishop to e6, this pawn hangs as well, so we can just capture, and after recaptures, we can take the b7 pawn if you wish. So the only way black can really defend is by playing a move like queen to d7 or queen to e7. And both of the moves doesn't look really good for black because either queen d7 or queen e7 will block one of the black's bishop from development. So for example, queen e7 now blocks his bishop. He can't develop like this and he can't castle. So we're going to continue now with the move pawn to d4, just controlling the center, and we're going to bring our bishop out on the next move. So in order for black to develop his dark squared bishop, he has to play a move like pawn to g6, which is the most played move in the database, but this is just too slow as he has to spend extra moves with g6, bishop g7, and castle, and now we can really launch an attack on the black's position with bishop to g5, gaining this pin on the knight to the queen, and we're going to push our pawn forward with e5 on the next move. So after bishop to g7, e5, captures, captures. Now, black cannot recapture the pawn on e5 because we can play rook to e1, either our f rook or a rook to e1, and this is just a pin on the queen and we win the queen easily. And rook a to e1 was played in the blitz game between two 2200s with the exact same position, exact same moves, and white went on to win easily in the next few moves. So even high-rated players will fall into this trap if they haven't seen it before, and that's why I say that this move over here, queen to b3, has an 81% win rate. So if black tries to defend with queen to d7, we're going to play the same idea, but we're going to play rook to e1 first because we're going to push our pawn forward on the next move. This is the strongest engine response. Of course, you can play the normal pawn to d4 as well, but the only difference here is if after bishop to g5, there's no longer the pin on the knight to the queen because now the queen is ready went to d7 instead of going to e7. So, which is why the computer prefers to play rook e1 first to play the move pawn to e5 on the next move. Because for example, black cannot play a move like bishop e7 because that just leaves the f7 pawn undefended and we can just capture. So black has to play pawn to g6 anyways and develop his pieces like this. And after pawn g6, we're going to strike in the center immediately with pawn to e5 because after captures, rook captures with check and black is ready in a tough position. If he plays bishop e7 to block, we just capture this pawn as I mentioned earlier. And if he moves his king, this is just a really bad position for black already as the king is stuck in the center. And we probably can play a move like pawn to d3 to bring our bishop out, or even sacrifice our pawn with pawn to d4 as most of black's pieces are still undeveloped and the king is just stuck in the center. Okay, so remember guys, in this Blackburne Shilling Gambit, do not capture this pawn on e5, but we capture this knight on d4 instead. Just be very careful because if I'm not mistaken, according to the database, knight takes e5 has been played by almost 2 million people, and almost 2 million people, all of them have fallen victim to this trap. So just be careful. Alright, the third and final variation here we have is after knight to f6, and if we play knight to g5, which is the fried liver attack, we've made a video about it, so do check it out if you're interested. Now instead of the normal moves like pawn to d5 by black, black can also play this sneaky move with knight takes e4. Now as white we have many options here, and the top two most played moves according to the database are actually not the best moves. The most played moves here are knight takes f7 and knight takes e4, and both of them are just not good for white. Why? Because, let's see first. Firstly, if knight takes f7, this looks good as we gain a double attack on the queen and the rook, but black can play this queen to h4, bringing out his queen early, attacking and threatening checkmate in one. If we play a move like castle, now black has knight takes f2, sacrificing his knight, attacking our queen. If rook takes, not only our bishop on c4 is hanging, he can also play a move like bishop to c5, bringing in another attacker and threatening to capture our rook. And as you guys can see, the computer evaluation on the left really shows black advantage with -1. So after knight takes e4, the second most played here is knight takes e4, recapturing the knight, but that just allows black a very easy and comfortable position after pawn to d5, as black will most certainly regain back the piece that he just sacrificed on e4. For example, a move like bishop d3, captures, and already this is a very easy position for black to play as the bishops can just develop normally. He can castle, whereas white's position is slightly behind in development. And as you guys can see, the computer already evaluates black as slightly better, -0.5 here. But if you run this position on a stronger engine, Stockfish 16 actually evaluates this position as -1 for black. So we want to avoid both of these replies And instead, the correct reply here is to play the move bishop takes f7 check. The king cannot capture because knight protects, so the only move is to move the king up to e7. And now we're going to play this move pawn to d4, which is not many players know as well. So take note and remember this move, pawn to d4. Now, what's the idea of pawn to d4 then? It looks like we're just giving away a pawn, right? And also our knight is still hanging. Our knight can be captured on g5. Well, the whole idea of pawn to d4 is we want to bring out our bishop to protect the knight, because if black captures, we recapture back with our bishop with check, and we're going to win the queen on d8 no matter what. For example, king takes, we just capture the queen, and it's 2 pieces for a queen. It's a pretty easy win for white, as the king is unsafe as well. So the most popular option here for black is to play the move knight takes d4. Or the second most popular move is knight takes d4, and the most played move I showed earlier was knight takes g5, where we win the queen easily. So after knight takes d4, now we're going to play this move pawn to c3, kicking away the knight. The knight retreats. Now we're going to play another key move to remember is bishop to d5 with multiple threats. So firstly, the bishop attacks the knight, and secondly, we're threatening to play knight to f7 to attack the queen and the rook. And again, black can never capture our knight on g5 because we can just capture back with the bishop and we win the queen, as mentioned earlier. So what can black do here? The only way for black to defend all of these is to play knight to d6. He gets his knight out of danger, and now the knight protects the f7 square. And what I like about this variation or this position is we have a really nice tactical blow where instead of playing knight to f7 like what we wanted earlier, we're actually going to play the move knight to e6, sacrificing our knight, because after captures, remember the idea I showed earlier with bishop to g5 check, as long as black cannot block this check, we are going to win the queen on d8. Alright, so that's the end of this video. Congratulations on learning how to counter early queen attacks by black. If you're interested in learning on how to crush the queen's gambit, then click on this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.